Good morning, everyone. Joining me today on the Founders Code podcast from Miami, Florida, is a computer scientist and internet entrepreneur with a solid track record of building high-growth, venture-backed technology companies. He's now founder and CEO of Archie Labs, a software consultancy that combines human expertise with AI agents to revolutionize the way software is built using Archie, their AI product architect. Please welcome Albert Santalo.
Hi, Shamil. It's great to be here. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Can you tell our audience a little bit about what the work that you do at Archie and the directions that you are taking during this AI boom of the world?
Sure. So look, first of all, I'd say that the real mission around the things that I and the team are doing, it's really about the transformation of software development in general, right? We can all see that that's beginning to happen with artificial intelligence, but we believe that there's a future that still has room for not only the AI but for the humans. And so Archie Labs is really, if you think of a software development firm, how would you rethink the way it works in the age of artificial intelligence, where humans still play a role, right? And so that's what we are. From the first moment that you interact with us, you're interacting with the fusion of humans and AI applications, AI agents, to take you through the entire life cycle of software design, architecture, development, and even into the production step.
And I think listening to one of your recent interviews, I really like that you've kind of compared them to electric cars. And you said that, instead of adding AI agentic to the current software development models, it would be like taking combustion engines and then trying to make them somewhat electric instead of just taking a new technology and just building around that.
Exactly. That really references, first principles thinking. It's like, I think that certainly when I was growing up hearing about the potential of electric cars, I thought of it as, okay, we're going to move from combustion engine propulsion to electric propulsion. But the first time I saw a Tesla, I said, well, it's a lot more than that, right? It's the car reimagined. And so we feel that software development needs that same kind of thinking. You can't just say, well, before we used to use coding to develop, to actually build the software, and now we're going to use artificial intelligence to build the software. It goes a lot deeper than that.
And how much has the overall product development roadmap and experiences changed in your view over the last 2-3 years, once we started getting all these powerful models, and now Opus 4.6 coming out, I think yesterday, with up to 1 million token context. What are the main parallel shifts, paradigm shifts that you are seeing?
Well, you've seen that in the last couple of years, we've gone from manual coding. There's manual coding. There was low code development. There was no code development. I would say that low code and no code really never fulfilled their true potential, and they are dead models, in my opinion, at this point. What we saw happen was, depending upon what type of person you are, if you're a software developer, tools started emerging that could make you more productive, and they have introduced tremendous productivity gains. Tools like, originally it was Microsoft Copilot, and then Cursor came around, Windsurf came around. Now we have, Google Anti-Gravity. We have a number of others that make, pure software developers a lot more productive. And we've seen anywhere from a minimum 40% productivity gains to 400% productivity gains with those tools. But you've also seen things like vibe coding emerge, which is intended to be vibe coding in its current form is primarily prompts to code. So it's natural language prompts that generate code and begin to kind of evolve an application. And we've seen that if you think of the spectrum of human beings, right, you think 100% of the world's population, about 0.3% of that population can code. Another 0.3% can use low code and no code tools. And now vibe coding has kind of expanded it so that now about 1% of all humans in the world could actually develop. And vibe coding is still primarily more about prototyping things than it is about actually building sophisticated applications. What we're all about is making that number a hell of a lot bigger. So imagine you'll never have 100% of people. There's still a significant amount of people that would rather just say, hey, can you build this for me, right? Because they don't want to learn any tool. And there's nothing wrong with that. But what if we could get to 20% or 40% or 50% of people could actually self-service and build their own applications? And those applications wouldn't suck. They were actually pretty good, right? Imagine, in a world where things are evolving, my belief of where is the world going is that more and more you're going to have less and less corporate jobs and more entrepreneurship. So it's going to be beholden, especially on young people, to figure out how they build their own businesses. What used to stand in the way of that, obviously every business today would have a technology component. The cost and the time and all of this stuff that would stand in the way of building a technology-enabled business is beginning to come down by essentially what we're doing and others are doing.
Yeah. And I think the thing that shocks me is seeing the share market dropping consistently for SaaS business, for most of the largest technology business that we see today. Which really signals that shift.
There's a massive shift, and it's terrifying for people. So why is it that SaaS companies, for instance, haven't evolved from an artificial intelligence perspective as much as they should? Why is it that service companies haven't evolved as much as they should using artificial intelligence? It's because they're afraid of what it's going to do to their business models. It benefits the end user, but what does it do to the business model? In services, how do you charge for services in a world where, artificial intelligence is doing part of the work? How do you do that in a law firm, right? That's all about billable hours. How do you transform the model using artificial intelligence? In a SaaS company, we've seen it. Most of them, especially the big guys that are have entrenched customer bases and maybe have become a little bit legacy these days, they're having a real hard time rethinking, using first principles thinking to rethink the way they do things. And so it's been a massive inhibitor, but, fortunately we live in a world that, especially in the United States, where competition is a real thing, right? And competitive forces are what's going to drive the transformation sooner or later, right? Eventually it will happen.
What do you think about when you look at, obviously as somebody who knows technology and has been in technology all his life, part of that, being in software development consultancy kind of sphere, you get to see all of these companies. You get to see the way they're thinking about technology too, the largest companies and the real adoption rates and everything. And sometimes I talk to some of my friends who are running also as IT consultancy, and they tell me about these real legacy systems, which are not even ripe for SaaS level implementation. And now they have all of this AI agentic, which obviously is not going to be adopted within the next 10 years, I guess, for them. But at the same time, they're so capitalized. They're becoming such a huge part of industry that having them go down is going to be a big hit for the town and the countries that they live in. What are you seeing currently over the last 5 years with the real kind of adoption rates compared to the hype, that is getting promised everywhere on the internet?
Yeah, I think especially in larger companies, especially in regulated industries, it's happening more slowly than it should be. It's very complex in those environments. There's a lot of friction. There's a lot of resistance. Some of that is human resistance. And truthfully, there's a misconception about artificial intelligence because, we can think of ChatGPT or Claude or any of these products. They're really consumer products, and they are really conversational artificial intelligence. So it's me as a human talking to the artificial intelligence with the primary objective of making me a better human, right? So it's giving me superpowers, right? But it's me and the machine, or the machine and me. But there's this whole other, branch of artificial intelligence around AI agents, which is really AI to AI communications. Most people struggle to think about that, right? To think about what that really means and why that's better or more appropriate in certain settings. But what businesses have to realize is that, conversational AI is the first layer, but the agentic AI is perhaps the most transformational force that has ever hit business over the long term, right? More impactful than the Industrial Revolution, potentially, over the long term. It won't happen overnight, but it has that kind of disruptive, ability to it.
Whenever I'm kind of exploring the latest tools, I get to see, like, with the OpenClaw, like recently also just installed to kind of see the capabilities of it being able to install its own skills, like the kind of like what kind of actions can you take in the world? What kind of apps can you use? And at the same time, I'm looking at LinkedIn and people see, oh, look, an AI has opened the browser and searched for a video. Oh my God. And they kind of like, they're shocked with the very kind of like basic things that you can see after you kind of deploy the basic kind of versions of what is currently available. So I'm still saying that there's a huge lag between what it currently is capable of and what kind of people are used to, using AI for.
Yeah, the AI stack is very complicated, and you need to spend real time with it and be in an environment where it's being used and you've got some really proficient people around you you can learn quickly, or you just dive in and start making mistakes and start figuring it out. But it takes a while to learn it, right? So we've seen this. Even very, very strong technologists, it's just a big ecosystem with a lot of complexity. It's not like ChatGPT. You swipe a credit card $20 later, and you've got all these AI capabilities. Actually, implementing real AI is complicated, and so that gets in the way of some of the, I think, expectations of the world was going to change overnight. It actually isn't. It's going to take a little bit longer. But that said, I don't know how long that is, right? It might be 5 years. It might be like the internet that really took 20 to 30 years or so to kind of get to where it's at. But it probably isn't that. It's probably shorter time horizon than that. Again, competitive forces driving that transformation. The problem is for businesses is that if they realize that they're getting disrupted, it's too late already, right? Like the reaction time, which might be a year or two to actually implement AI agents and things like that, by the time a competitor is actually showing up and disrupting you, if you're a year or two behind them, you're in big trouble. Big trouble.
And that is driving everybody to explore, research, try, and keep trying new things, just throwing things against the wall. Like, you can apply AI to everything. Like, engineering, consumer, like support, perfect. Sales, maybe even. There are other things that people try to get AI into, which, like, why? There is absolutely no use for it there. But everybody's still trying because, it feels like everybody has to put AI into everything nowadays, right?
Everybody really does have to. I'm not sure everyone's trying though, so like, I mean, we talk to a lot of businesses that I'd classify them in people that are kind of advanced and leading the charge, those that know they have to do something, can do something, and are actively trying to figure it out. And then those that are just kind of like either don't see it, don't want to try it, are fat and happy kind of in their current position. And that may be appropriate for who they are. But the reality is I don't think everyone's trying it, right? In our world where we are, we take it for granted, right? Because we are the tip of the spear in terms of these tools. We understand them. We come across a use case when we talk to almost anyone in any business, and we immediately see how they can use AI to figure things out and do things better, right? But not everyone's at that level of thinking, right? It's taken, for me, certainly it's taken a number of years to kind of understand it all, be a practitioner of it, build our own solutions, help other people build solutions to get to this point, and not everyone's there.
Do you think people are generally scared about how capable they'll find AI solutions to be?
Yeah, I think people are very scared about AI. There's lots of opinions on where this is going ultimately for humanity. I've seen it expressed in many, many different ways. First of all, I think it's going to be a massive productivity boost. If population is in decline in the Western world, which it generally is, then without AI, we would encounter a productivity problem. So AI gives us the ability to have more productivity and eventually get to kind of this world of abundance, right? So meaning that, many of the things that we have to do today or things that cost a lot of money just become abundant, right? And then, you hear people talking about universal incomes and if people don't have jobs, like, do we need to give them money? And that part's terrifying to me, right? In terms of like people without jobs and money and a society that doles out money without necessarily rewarding the people that work the hardest is a problem, right? Or at least I think so. And so, I'm not sure where that future goes, because people need to be relevant, need to feel relevant. Some people would say that artificial intelligence is literally an infringement on humanity of sorts, that it is dehumanizing and that it is, it's taking away from the integrity of what it means to be a human being. In the past, technologies like this have simply enhanced who we are and enhanced our abilities. There's so many positive things, including things like curing diseases, right? Solving anti-aging, things like that we think would be good things, right?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, how many jobs will it eliminate? How many jobs will be reclassified? And there's this argument that, well, as jobs have been eliminated, because they have in the past, people have retooled and evolved into other things. The question is, if this comes really, really fast, can society actually do it fast enough? And not everybody, in society is of high intellect and can understand all these things. And, there are people that just, will have a ceiling of how far they can go. And so, what happens in all of that? I don't have the answers for it, but these are kind of the things we need to think about. But if you ask me, how should a young person think about this? Person who's not really into their career or just beginning to be into their career, thinking about, should I be a lawyer? Should I be a doctor? Should I be an accountant? Should I be a software engineer? The answers to those things have changed, right? To use an example, let's take software developers, designers, and product managers, right? Typically, all three of those roles were absolutely critical to develop good software. But as AI and vibe coding tools have come out, we've seen a convergence of those roles. Like now, coders are like, do I really need this product manager or do I really need this designer? And then the product managers thinking the same thing, right? I don't really need the designer and I don't really need the developer. And then the designer's thinking the same thing. And so the question is, who's right? And I think the answer is they're all right, right? They're all right. And so what does it really mean? If you are a developer that really only knows about the code, like literally you have to be told what to build at excruciating detail, you have no flair for design whatsoever, well, that's going to become a problem for you. But if you are a person who understands computer science, has a command of some languages, which could become irrelevant, has experience building software, has experience working with product managers and designers, and you know enough of being a product manager and designer to be dangerous, then now having those multiple skills gives you massive ability and massive opportunity in this world. Because now you could literally take the lead on building somebody's product without having to bring in all these other people, right?
Yeah.
And so my advice, going back to the advice of what would I tell a young person, it's like you have to become a master at wielding the artificial intelligence tools. And it's better for you to be cross-discipline than, before it was like, if you're not deep in any one thing, you're irrelevant. Well, I think you want to be deep and broad, truthfully, but you don't want to be too deep in one thing that you don't see what's around you. Like you've got to, if nothing else, go deep in one thing and then understand the adjacent disciplines so that you can
The magic happens in the intersection.
Yeah. But but really become proficient in using artificial intelligence in its different forms in your career and in your life, truthfully.
What I'm thinking a lot when thinking about younger people trying to kind of find their way in the world is kind of the very basic of it is try to build a character. And being as a solo founder right now, like being a founder is the hardest job out there. And only other founders will really understand what this means and what it entails. Like it is quite hard to grasp for just an average person. Could you talk about what were the moments in your life, like starting from your early days, that kind of like shaped you into the Albert that we see today?
That's an interesting question. So, look, first of all, the things that shaped me are, probably the most important thing was that, my parents are both Cuban. They both left Cuba in the early 60s, escaping communism. Yeah. So they would call themselves, refugees in this country. And they one thing you got to know about Cubans is Cubans are great Americans. So they come here, they integrate, they believe in education, they believe in capitalism, and they're very enterprising. And so they bestowed that on me. And, when I would talk to them about this, they would tell me, look, Cuba's where we came from, but America is our country. Mm-hmm. And so I was brought up from my early days, knowing that I was a Cuban American, that Cuba once upon a time was this beautiful, wonderful place, and it got ruined. And that it didn't matter where I was, I could lose it again. Right. And so what does that teach me? It teaches me that I'm incredibly blessed. I'm blessed that I came here. I'm blessed that I live at this time. I'm blessed that I was even born in the first place. Right. And so it's up to me to maximize that. And so how do I maximize that? It's like, I've got to take risk, and I've got to try to be the best version of myself that I possibly can, and try to help the people around me in the process. Right. Try to be a good person. And that's a scary thing, right? Because taking risk and putting yourself out there it's scary. It's scary because sometimes you put other people at risk, and sometimes nobody wants to fail, right? But when I look at my parents and I say, look, they left everything, all their worldly possessions, everything behind because they had to, and then they started all over again and did well. It's like, what do we really have to lose? I could have been born 2,000 years ago, and my life would have been about defending my family and foraging for food, right? Yeah. So I'm incredibly blessed. I got nothing to complain about. And so we were brought up to be educated. We were brought up to be incredibly hardworking, and we were brought up to be enterprising. And so that set the course of my life. And I figured out when I was about 6 years old that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I kind of had a vague impression of what that meant. The story's a little embarrassing, but basically I was watching soap operas with my mom, and there was this cool guy on the show that I'm like, he had the nicest house, he had the prettiest wife, he had the nicest cars. Everybody came to him and they respected him. And I'm like, what does that guy do, Mom? And she said, well, he's an entrepreneur. And I'm like, at that point you're thinking everybody's a policeman or a fireman or, I'm like, what is that? She goes, a person who starts a business. And I'm like, well, that's what I want to be. And so I didn't really know what that meant exactly back then, but that set the course of my life. But when I was 18 years old, I got married. And so I was a freshman in college, and my daughter was born before my 19th birthday. So I had a lot of responsibility very early in my life. I started working. I had worked through high school, serving ice cream. And then I got my first professional job. I was enrolled at the University of Miami studying computer engineering, and I got my first professional job at a bank processing company. This is in the late 80s. But we were still using technology that literally was architected from the 60s. So I was working in mainframes with assembly languages. It was a wonderful place to start my professional career because I understood a very, very complex industry. I understood the basics of how a computer works. the kind of thing, I was literally programming every day in assembly languages. But at the same time, interacting with business and understanding what business needed to do. So that for me, that experience was very formative for me. Like literally everything I do today somehow is influenced by what I did back then. I then had an amazing experience in the late 90s that I joined a founding team that had left KPMG Consulting. And it just so happened that the partner in charge of consulting was based in Miami, a person that I admire tremendously. His name's Ted Fernandez. And Ted left the firm, took 50 people with him, raised $20 million of venture capital. I was lucky enough to be one of the early team members there. And we listed on the NASDAQ 11 months later. So
what are the processes like? What is the life inside a company that goes to IPO within 11 months?
Yeah, and I can't take the credit for any of that, but I was sitting in the passenger seat watching this, right? And these were older, more accomplished guys. I was in my late 20s at the time.
Yeah.
And it was amazing to watch. We built a really solid company, and I watched very carefully kind of that whole process of listing, running the public offering, going public, what that was like. And I was just like, man, that's what I want to do. That's the dream for me, is to lead a company and make it successful and go through that process. But by that time, I had 4 young kids, and my wife is incredibly accomplished, but she's an educator, right? She's not a person that makes a lot of money. So I was the breadwinner. But shortly thereafter, the dot-com bubble collapsed in 2000. And by 2001, the work I was doing management consulting, helping large U.S. companies with technology transformation. And my work had just gotten incredibly boring. And I was just like, if I'm ever going to be an entrepreneur, like who am I? What am I? Am I ever going to do this? And so I finally kind of a month after 9/11 decided to leave the firm and start my first venture with a group of co-founders. And it was an absolutely terrifying experience. 4 young kids at home in private schools, investing my own money, going without pay, raising capital for the first time. It was terrifying. So I evolved as a human being quite a bit during that phase.
Having, 4 kids at the age of 30, having to grow up so fast, getting married, like a proper adult life starting at 19, 20. Did you ever feel like you went into the world of the serious kind of corporate business and industries a bit too quickly? You didn't get to live off the kind of the gap year type of life that a lot of people are talking about today.
The what kind of life? I'm sorry?
It's like gap year, when people take a gap year from work,
travel,
experience themselves, do like the social stuff.
No, I've never been a recluse. Yeah, I've never really been a nerd per se. So I've always had a social life. I have put it on the shelf many times along the way. I've got plenty of friends and so forth, but I have put it as a second priority many times behind work. And I have no problem doing that. I think I'm the type of person that work kind of defines who I am. So when I've had problems with work, it can be a challenge, and that's just part of growing up and learning to kind of brush it off and understanding that there's ups and downs in everything you do. But no, I think that the way I'm built, I kind of feel like if you want to do something extraordinary in the world, you have to make extraordinary sacrifices to make that happen. And not only have I never been afraid to do that, but I've had a fair amount of support at home to be able to enable me to do that. And I'm in an interesting time right now, right? Because people think of entrepreneurs as young, right? Like people think of young entrepreneurs before they have a lot of responsibility and so forth. But, I've been an entrepreneur a number of times throughout my in my 30s, in my early 30s, my early 40s, early 50s. And it's been different every time, right?
How so?
Well, in my early 30s, it was lots of responsibility, 4 young kids, private schools, this, that, and the other. In my early 40s, very different because, I had, and by the way, backing up, In my early 30s, also, the dot-com bubble had blown up.
Yep.
Right? Young technology entrepreneurs were out of favor completely, not to mention one in Miami. Okay. So, like, lots of friction, lots of impediments to trying to do what I wanted to do. Because especially back then, Miami was not known as a place that you would do tech entrepreneurship. In my early 40s, it was a different experience because, by that point, your friends have now established themselves in business and have, your friends now have money, right? And so they're able to support you. So in my second venture, $8 million of angel investment came together pretty fast, right? And this was in the middle of the financial collapse, right? So in January 2009 was when CareCloud was when I incorporated it.
You love those post burst housing
it
crisis.
just kind of worked out that way. Yeah, it kind of worked out that way, not on purpose. But I think there was $100 million of angel investment raised in all of 2009. And we had 8% of that essentially in that year in the entire US. That's what statistic I heard once. And then went to Silicon Valley. So no company in Miami had been funded by Silicon Valley in at least 10 years prior to since the dot-com days. And so we were kind of the first, or at least the first that I know of. This was in 2011 that we secured our $20 million Series A led by Silicon Valley investors. So it was very different, right? As a second-time entrepreneur, I felt a lot more in control. I still felt very exposed. My kids were still young enough. They were still in private schools, and it was a little bit different. But having had success before certainly helped me. I think I approach any of these ventures with a lot of humility, thinking any one of them could fail, and I really hate to fail, right? So I really, really, really. I'm not one of these entrepreneurs that kind of brushes off failure. I don't do well with that at all. Then when we started 8base, it was different. I wanted to bootstrap more, not necessarily go to VC. I ended up going to VC anyway, eventually. We had a lot of challenges during the 8base days, including a little thing called Russia invading Ukraine, by the way, because we had 50 people in Russia at that time. It was a big struggle for us as a business. So, very different kind of experiences. I also, when I started 8base, I was in a different financial position, didn't need to raise a lot of money. It was just different experience.
Yeah. And it seems to me like when you were 30, you were just, working on your first venture, kind of starting it small. And then when you said that when you turned 40 and you started a venture, then you were just aiming at a lot higher, like, levels of impact numbers. Did you feel less kind of scary to manage that much capital running the company, like as compared to 30? Were you aiming a lot higher too?
Yeah, there were lots of scary moments, including big burn rates, right? Like, what I thought was a big burn rate in my first company turned out to be a little burn rate in my second company. And then dealing with, venture capital and venture capitalists is always kind of an interesting thing. I think I've dealt with really good ones, like when I say really good ones, really good human beings. And I've dealt with really bad human beings in that business. So I've had a little bit and kind of everything in between. It's a very tricky thing for a founder.
And there are a lot of founders who are trying to get VC funding, and sometimes they just jump at the first offer that they get because they have the friends, the family. They want to prove to the world that oh look, somebody believes in my idea other than me. So they just go for the first money they can find. What can you tell about like how to identify the good and the bad, and to be brave enough to kind of say no to the bad ones?
Well, the biggest thing is having the ability to say no. So, when I started my first company in 2001, there was no Y Combinator, there was no Techstars, there was no all of the incredible body of knowledge that we have on the internet about best practices of how you actually start companies. So you were observing what other people were doing, you were figuring out as you went along, and you were explaining it to a lot of people. And that was really, really difficult. Today, so we've evolved now so that there is all this incredible knowledge. Like, you can go to founder school, Y Combinator site, and you can see videos of really kind of world-class advice on how to do different things, right? And I encourage any serious tech entrepreneur to do that. But the reality is that there's a playbook that lives inside of Silicon Valley, and there's a playbook for everything else. And every local areas, they're all a little bit different. But when you're in Silicon Valley, you know, when you're talking to that venture community, they're always about, yeah, pick the best one, you know, do your due diligence, this and the other. But most entrepreneurs, even ones who have raised real venture money, will tell you they haven't always had a ton of term sheets show up to actually fund what they're doing. That got better for a while, certainly in the frenzy of the last, I don't know if it was the 2019 to 2021 kind of time frame. There's been periods where it didn't matter where you were, right? But generally speaking, Silicon Valley, if you look at even artificial intelligence investments, most of the money goes there. So there's a playbook that you have when you're over there, and then there's a playbook everywhere else. I absolutely had a Miami playbook. And so it was very different than the advice kind of that, you know, when I was over there, I always had a foot in Silicon Valley. That was part of the strategy, but I had to adapt kind of the things they would tell me. So
it's a lot more scarce.
Much more scarce, and a lot of times different kind of thinking around venture investment. There have been times when you saw that it was really kind of polar opposites. Like I remember after the dot-com boom, the West Coast went into a mode of taking big risks, making big moves. The East Coast, places like Boston and so forth, which at the time were venture capital kind of hotspots, were very conservative, all right? And if you look at the Southeast United States, you know, although there were people talking about venture investing, it was almost like later stage venture investing, right? Like, let me see your unit economics. Let me see your financials. Let me make sure everything's working, and then I'll give you money. And it's still the case to a large extent in the Southeast. So it's very different where you are, and you're going to have to travel, and you're going to have to go places. And so I had very specific plays on how I made that work, because I didn't want to move to Silicon Valley. You know, I wasn't born in Miami. I got here when I was 11. Never wanted to live anywhere else, and it's only gotten better. So I definitely don't want to be anywhere else.
So what are the red flags in VCs?
You have to do your diligence on the VCs. And as a founder, you're better off saying no to VC money completely than you are getting the wrong VC. Because if the wrong VC gets on your cap table, it's very, very difficult, if not impossible, to divorce them. So I've seen, you know, term sheets and deals done with very, very kind of oppressive protective provisions and board situations and driving founders to run out of money so they can put in more money. I think overall, venture has gotten better when it comes to all those things because there's so much more transparency and so forth. But you still have to be incredibly careful because I still see those deals happen. And then, you know, sometimes founders come to me and I give them advice on like, how do you work your way out of those situations? Some of them have been able to do it. Some of them haven't. But I myself have witnessed, you know, my first company, the VC behavior was horrific. It would be things that if I described it to a venture capitalist today, they wouldn't believe it. Like that's how bad it was. Because I think what we can all agree on is that a startup is about the founders. It's about the people who work there. It's not about the investors. The investors play a very important role, but without the founders, assuming that they're, you know, valid founders that are backable, right? The company's nothing, right? And so there's certain rules that when venture capitalists kind of broach those rules, step in too far, things begin to become dysfunctional. And if the founder or the founding team is not showing up every single day, trying to conquer the world, motivated and pumped up about that, it's not going to happen. It's too hard. It's too hard.
Yeah. But how do you stay motivated? Like, because whenever I talk to founders, I ask them usually a question of, what is the percentage of, you know, good days when you wake up and, you know, it's going to be a good, easy day? And the days when you wake up and you're like, okay, what's the next pile of shit I have to shovel?
Right.
And usually, as I say, like it's usually about like 20/80 or like 10/90 towards like having 90% of like the shitty types of days. And you're still supposed to be motivated, well, energized, optimistic.
Yeah.
What do you tell yourself? Like, what are your life hacks to kind of get yourself back on the seat, to be driving?
Yeah. Well, look, this is what we sign up for, right? Whenever I see founders that kind of get into it because they think it's glamorous or it's cool or it's, hip, I just kind of nod my head and go like, it's not, man. Like,
enjoy.
yeah. That's not if your reason to do it is that, you're done. It's not gonna happen. You might get that eventually, but if you're chasing it, it's never gonna happen, right? So the job begins with doing the most dreadful thing that you need to do first. You wake up in the morning and it's like, what's that thing that I need to do that I don't want to do, that I keep procrastinating? I got to do that first. Get it out of the way. You're going to feel a lot better afterwards. You're going to move. You're going to advance the ball. Doing a startup is a game of inches. It's about de-risking the venture every single day, getting closer to the goal. It is not about, to use American football kind of terminology. It's not about throwing Hail Marys. It's about running the ball a yard at a time to try to get into the end zone. It's the only thing that really works. And we tend to look at startup stories and startup situations from the lens of what we read about, which is usually the massive successes and the massive failures. Nobody writes about the stuff in the middle, right?
Yeah.
But most companies are in the middle. They're dealing with the crap. They're dealing with mediocrity in many, many forms. And it's how do they punch above that, right? And 50% of the battle is about being in the fight in the first place. It's about determination and grit. The other 50% is about, do you have a good idea? Do you have any chance of success? Is your timing right? Do you have the right people around you? All of this stuff. But 50%, if not more, is about just dogged determination. So you got to embrace it. You got to be realistic about it. And you can't, it's like being on social media all day. If you're going to be on social media all day, you're going to be depressed because everybody's life is better than yours. So if you're reading about, the founder that just cashed out for $1 billion and you think that everybody's life except yours is like that, you're not going to make it. The truth is, most people's life as a founder is more like yours than you think. It's dreadful, and you gotta muscle through it. But if it was easy, everyone would do it. I mean, who doesn't want to be really rich, famous, right? And have the ability. They don't want to work. They don't have to work. Have all the recognition that comes with building something from nothing, and to have that personal satisfaction. Everybody wants that, and to not have a boss.
Responsibilities.
Yeah, and to not have a boss. It's like that's the destination, right?
Yeah.
But it's really, really hard. What stands between you and that is difficult, and it's like that on purpose. It's meant to keep mediocre people out of it, right? If you are not willing to be excellent, if you are not willing to be absolutely determined, don't even start.
And from a lot of people I hear, like, if you want to start with something, start with your body, start with your health, like go to the gym, get working out. And I know that you're deep into like cycling, right? And what role does cycling play in your life?
Yeah, I would say, just physical fitness is incredibly important to me. I like to eat. And I like to stress eat. Like I don't like to stress eat, but it just happens that way. If I have a lot of stress, I'll eat. So if I don't exercise, like I'll lose my sanity. So I exercise pretty much every single day. And in that process, it's kind of like pushing myself type exercise. Yeah. So it'll be a combination of, weightlifting and aerobic, and kind of cardio type stuff, outdoor cycling, indoor cycling, running, these type of things. Yeah, we're actually my friends and I every 2 years do this big production we call the Body Fat Challenge, and we're actually in it right now. And the penalty, it's 90 days, and the penalty for losing is you get your head shaved by the winners. and you can't get out of it. You literally cannot get out of it. You have to write an enormous check that doesn't get cashed, but it gets held by an attorney that if you default, it gets cashed. And the check's enormous. Like I would shave my head in a minute before I let them cash that check. So yeah, so that's a lot of fun, and we actually get a lot of business done, but it helps keep us healthy in the process. There's 30 of us in the competition right now. So
how did you get that group together?
Yeah, well, I can't take the credit for it. A very good friend of mine, actually investor in a few of my companies, and a very successful guy, started it in 1998, and it's been done religiously for every 2 years since then.
The leanest group.
Yeah. No, at the end, it works out that way. So it's great. Mm-hmm. But to your point, exercise releases endorphins. It makes you feel good about yourself. It helps you cope with stress and so forth. So very, very important to stay active in this. And if you believe in the mentality of I don't have time for exercise because I'm working too much, well, eventually you're going to be working less and less productive because you're just not going to have the ability to put in all those hours. So you might as well, invest a half hour or an hour of your time every day in exercise.
And I usually find that one of the good qualities that founders develop is assertiveness. And I find everybody, when they're starting, a lot of people are trying to be nice, They don't know the difference between nice and kindness. They're we're building a family here, How is your relationship with, that, using the healthy aggression and assertiveness that we all have to put that to good use for the company? How is your relationship with that evolved?
That's a very good question. And I think that my view on that and my approach towards that has evolved over the years. When you look, the first thing I would say is, culture in your company, incredibly important. And the first few people that you surround yourself in your company are incredibly important. And then those people are very important in helping to form the culture. And then the culture has to be adhered to. I've probably seen it all when it comes to this type of situation, but you as a founder have to be very comfortable in your own skin, and you have to assert yourself. And sometimes you have to assert yourself with people that you might otherwise think are more successful, more intelligent than you, more wealthy than you. And it's really hard. It's hard for a lot of people. The word humility is interesting in that whole thing, because sometimes when you're incredibly humble, you listen to all opinions and you try to be diplomatic and you try to not come across as too assertive, right?
Arrogant.
Or arrogant. But nobody has the responsibility that you have as a founder and the vision that you have, and not everybody sees it as clearly. And then there comes a point in your company where also people want to be you. That's happened to me as well. Is that, people around you, your executives sometimes want to kind of be you or have what you have, or even investors. I've seen investors do that as well. People on the board do that as well. And you have to recognize it, but you have to continue to act in a very kind of assertive way. I was tested once after my first company, before my second company, on some of this, and they said that, I forget exactly what it was, but it was something about humility and arrogance or something like that. I remember one of my friends said, "Yeah, you're not humble and you're arrogant." And I was like, interestingly enough, the test came back with the opposite. The test said that if I'm in a room with a bunch of really smart people that are more accomplished than me, and I know for a fact what we need to do, which most of the time is correct, because by the time I come to, in that test, it said, by the time I come to that conclusion, I've gathered enough data and used the right judgment to kind of say, this is what we need to do. But other people in the room might be arguing a different course, and that there just comes a time where you just have to say, look, this is my decision and this is what we're doing. And that I wasn't strong enough in some of those things. And if you look back at mistakes I've made along the way, that quality in me has showed up, right? And so I course corrected, right? I corrected it from then on, or at least I mostly did, right? And it served me well. And by the time we got to where we are now, I feel like, my companies are a well-oiled machine. Everybody fits in the culture. Doesn't mean we don't have diversity, but everybody fits. Everybody knows how to act. Everybody works well together. Everybody respects each other. There isn't a lot of dissension on where we should be going. And everybody understands that, the CEO is the CEO and that the CEO sets the direction after lots of opinions and lots of information gathering. But at the end of the day, that's what happens. And it's functioning incredibly well. It's functioning better than I've ever had it in any of my other companies. And so knock on wood, let's hope that can continue.
And what is the culture that you're building basically within the companies? What are the qualities and people that you cherish the most?
Look, I look for, number one, intellectual curiosity, no matter who you are, what you do. I don't care if you're a finance person, it doesn't matter. But I want you constantly being a student in the game, figuring out how you can be better and what tools can help you be better and what's the latest and greatest, and not being afraid of those things. Number two, have to have a very strong work ethic. Because, this whole thing of work-life balance, maybe at some point, some good days, we'll try to be super accommodating to people. And I don't feel like we're infringing on work-life balance, but we're here to do a job, and it's a job that most people don't want to do, and it's a level of excellence that we expect. And if you can't make that a priority, then you just don't belong here. There's nothing wrong with you, right? Yeah. Just don't belong with us. I don't care how talented you are, right? Really don't. If you can do your job in 20 hours, well, then you should be doing 2 jobs, right? It's just, the bottom line is there's always more that you can be doing, and that's what we expect. Yeah. And then the third thing is that you just can't be an asshole, right? To use an inappropriate word, but basically you have to be a good citizen. You got to work well with others, and you got to prop up the people around you versus bring them down. Sometimes you find that you have a very talented person, but they just don't have a good attitude. And then what does it happen? It makes everybody else not work at their, happily and at their peak. And so you've got to identify those people, even if they're big contributors, and you got to get them out. And I've done that well about 50% of the time. You try to not hire them, right? You try to identify it before you hire them. But if you talk to most CEOs and you ask them, what's the biggest mistake you ever made? Most of them will tell you, I should have moved on somebody that I knew that my instincts was telling me they weren't a fit. I should have moved on them faster. And they didn't. And I'm guilty of that like as much as anybody else, right? Because we end up loving people, and we love people that follow our vision, right? We want the best for people, but there just comes a time where it's better for everybody, them, you, and your coworkers, to just replace them, which can be painful. So I look for those 3 things, in addition to, obviously, they got to be really good at what they do.
Hmm. And with the more experience that you get, do you ever feel like you have less patience for mediocrity?
I have patience for people who think that that's okay. I lack patience for people who think that it's okay. We hire new people all the time, right? And we bring people into the fold, and they may have never been subjected to a culture that demands excellence. All I ask of them is to allow themselves to be criticized in a constructive way, and to try to do better every day, to try to achieve that. If they don't think it's important, or they don't, make it a priority, or they have a ceiling of sorts for whatever reason that's self-imposed, not because of ability, that's where I have problems, right? I think of business like a relay race. So a lot of people think excellence is like, we're going to build an excellent product, or we're going to, have excellent marketing. I think of it, we got to have excellent everything. We got to have excellent finance. We got to have excellent recruitment. We've got to have excellent everything. Like, is there a reason that one area of the company should be excellent and the rest is not? It's like, no, everybody has to be in that mindset. They have to be producing better output, and they have to be working internally on their own systems to improve them and make them better and more scalable and more efficient all the time.
Yeah.
And if they do that, they themselves are going to be enriched, and they themselves are going to be more valuable in the marketplace, right?
Yeah.
I want people to be recognized for, if they have worked in my companies, then they must be a badass, right? Mm-hmm. And that has happened. You know, you've seen people that kind of graduate from the system, and they've moved on and they've taken on bigger roles, and they always come back to, like, I was really tested. I was tested when I worked in this company, and it made me better, right? And I look back, and I used to have a Care Cloud. It was very pronounced. Care Cloud was a really difficult product, a really difficult industry, but we nailed it. We had hyper growth. Like, the growth was massive and the walls were shaking, right? And there would be times where I'd have to call a meeting, and I'd be talking to the troops, and they'd be looking at me like, man, we're tired. like, it's crazy, this, that, and the other. And I would be like, well, what's the alternative? It's like, we have to embrace the success that we have. If the company is not growing, if any company is not growing, it is dying, right? It is through growth that we have success, and we create opportunities for all of you to have bigger roles and make more money and all of this stuff. You don't have to wait for your boss to die or retire before you take on their role, right? When you're growing. And so it's hard while it's happening, but it's just a necessary evil.
Yeah. And with, I can understand when you were 20, 30, you know, being a young dad from a refugee family, you know, you're focused about making good by your family, you know, earning money, getting that financial freedom, security at the start. What gets you out of bed in the morning now?
Same things. The financial responsibility is a little bit different. It's actually very liberating, right? Because kids are older, more money in the bank. It's a different situation, right? That's both a money and a time thing, right? Because when your kids are young, you have to spend a lot of time with them. It's different. It's different now. But there's still a lot that, you know, I don't feel anywhere near the level of I've accomplished enough. And I don't ever think about retirement. It's not something I ever think about. It's not something I ever think I want to do. You know, obviously having the ability to do it if I want, that's important, but never thought about not doing it. Of all the things I've ever done, and I've done some cool things, this is the most exciting time of all for me. Because obviously I'm a computer science person. Artificial intelligence coming into the world is the coolest technology a person like me could ever think about, right? It's just, it's unbelievable. And, you know, I feel like a master of the universe in being able to wield it, not only myself, but the people around me and what we can do. It's unbelievable, right? And, you know, our clients are incredibly happy. They're just, it's a delight to work with them. And I have the choice, right? Is the other thing. I don't have VCs and a governance structure that says I have to do this or that or the other. And it's not a complaint against VCs. I've had great experience with venture capital. But it's more about I get to do things the way I want to do them. So for instance, Archie Labs might not exist if we were backed by venture capital, because it's a services company. Yeah, it's a services company. It's more scalable, more profitable, and more technology enabled, but it's still a services company. And I actually like being involved in the services. So I like at the beginning of our engagements being involved as kind of the principal architect of somebody else's product. That's something I do. I spend, you know, some of my time doing that and working with founders. And we develop this really, really incredible bond in the process that I think they enjoy and I enjoy and my team enjoys. And then little by little, I might let go and let the team do more, right? So it's not sucking up all my time, but I have the choice to be able to do that if I want to. And at the same time, I get to focus on the design of Archie and the marketing of Archie and all this other really, really cool stuff. But it's my call, I like that. Didn't have that before.
Almost like creative freedom.
Creative freedom. Yeah, it's definitely creative freedom. And not to, I'm still businesses first, right? So I'm not going to do stupid stuff. I'm not going to do stuff that sucks all of my time, right? Or any of that. But I'm always going to be about what's the most important business goal that we have to do. But I have the ability to cut across those things and not, and like nobody's tapping me on the shoulder going, hey, focus on this other thing.
Yeah. And as a last question, I know a lot of people listening to this would say, well, it's easy for you to say because you've been in technology all your life. You kind of seen the industries. You have all of these connections. You can see the interplay in the industry. But for those just finishing up university, with a degree that they thought that will be useful out there, and now all this talk about, people trying to be operators of AI in all of these different industries, what would you kind of give them as an advice to make their path easier for them to pick what to do and to get that internal energy to be able to do that?
Complicated question. Not everybody's built the same, right? There's a lot of misconceptions I think that get thrown around. Like there's this one of figure out what you love and then focus on that. And it's like, okay, sometimes what you love is not congruent with actually making money. I think making money is incredibly important. So, contributing to an economy, taking your share of it, doesn't mean a lot of money, but, taking your share of it, feeding your family, having stability, being able to have options of what you do with your free time, all of that is enabled through money. And so what you have to do is you have to find something you can be passionate about. It may not be the most passionate about, but you can be passionate about and be good at and translates to making money. Because look, I guarantee no matter what it is, if your thing that you're super passionate about turns out to be something that you can make money about around 20 years into your career, you're still gonna be tired of it. You're gonna be bored of it. You're still gonna be, but the question is how much money you're making at that time. So if you're making $20,000 and instead of making $1 million a year, right? 20 years in, you're still going to be sick of that job, but it's like, but at least I'm making $1 million a year, right? Like, so I would say, through that lens as a young person, figure it out. Even if you wasted 4 years in college having fun, just figure it out, right? Become a master at artificial intelligence. You don't need to be a computer scientist to be a master at artificial intelligence. Try to figure out, are you going to take a corporate path or are you going to take a more entrepreneurial path? If you're going to take a more entrepreneurial path, try to do something durable, that's meaningful, that's somewhat scalable. These days with technology, you can scale a small business pretty well. And if you go down that corporate path, make sure that you stock away money, you invest in other things, you buy real estate, you do whatever it is so you have, kind of stable financial life outside of your core job. And we just don't know what's going to, it's not uncommon for corporate America or corporate Earth to pull the rug out from somebody and they're on the job market looking for the next thing or whatever it might be, right? So try not to be dependent on your core job over the long term. When you're in your 20s, the number one objective is to learn and set the foundation for the rest of your life. It's not to make all your money in your 20s, right? And and the really hard part is to not spend your money on partying, but to try to actually stock it away and invest it, and this is one of these, it's like, do as I say, not as I do. So, it's difficult, but that's the best advice I could give a young person. And then, the stuff you see on social media, people making it look easy, people making it look like they have this amazing life. Don't believe it. It's not true. Life is hard. Life is hard, but don't take it too seriously. Get through the bad times and have faith. to that point, the biggest evolution I made as a professional, as a human professional, when I did my first company, was I evolved from kind of a creature of logic to a creature of faith. And by faith, I didn't necessarily mean religious faith. I meant just faith in the universe, faith in myself, that if I put myself in this risky situation, that I was going to figure it out, even if I couldn't plot the strategy from before I started, right? Up until that point, I was a person who would say, okay, here's my goal. This is a strategy. Entrepreneurship is too difficult for that. You've got to be able to make the moves along the way. And so what happened in that process? I ultimately had to let go of the logic. And what I found was that if I was in the game and if I was working hard and if I was trying to solve problems, doors would open for me that I never expected. So doors that were bigger, and better than what I had thought about before I started the journey, right? And so that applies to life, right? If you're doing the right things and you're working hard, and if you're an entrepreneur or not an entrepreneur, but if you just have faith in yourself and you keep advancing, keep trying, eventually things are going to happen in a positive way. Doors and opportunities are going to open. But it's scary. It's super scary, right? People don't like to be exposed, but I always go back to the same thing. It's like, what if you were born 10,000 years ago? What would your life have been like? Would it really matter if you lost all your money and you had to start all over again? No, back then it wouldn't have mattered. So why does it matter now?
And I remember in 2006, a film came out called The Secret. It kind of talks about this way of communicating with the universe. And there's like trust, visualize.
Yeah.
Just go and do it, take action. How's your relationship with the universe? Because you've mentioned it and it shows up in my life a lot as well. How has your communication and relation with the universe evolved?
That's an interesting question. I can be prone to kind of be caught up in the day-to-day and lose sight of the bigger picture. It's been known to happen. I think I have to deliberately tell myself to do that every morning and every evening, right? To just kind of reflect and have a conversation with God or the universe or whatever it is to different people, and be thankful and just wish for more good things, right? More positive things. And to your point, visualizing them in your mind. And smart people have a problem. Smart people tend to work every scenario. And a lot of the scenarios are bad scenarios. And they tend to occupy our thoughts. It's really important to get those out of your head. When was the last time you thought about some really horrible scenario and it actually happened? It rarely ever does. Maybe never to most of us, right? It's somewhere in some sort of spectrum of really awesome to really, really crappy, right? Yeah. And so, worry is a misuse of the imagination. It's much more important to focus on the positive. And if you focus on that hard enough and believe that it can happen, it will happen. Hopefully that answers your question.
This is such a great point to finish the podcast on. I really like the energetic boost that I've got. Like right now, all I'm thinking is gratitude. And even though it's like it's 9:30 in the evening in Spain, I'm like, I'm still going to go to the gym. Like after a podcast, that's why I don't like them. When talking to founders as energetic, as enthusiastic as you, and it's really late, I'm like, I have to go. That's what we signed up for. This is going to be hard. This is what hard feels like.
Yeah. That's funny. That's great. Especially all the options you have in Valencia. You could go out to a really nice venue.
Yeah, that's true. And it's quite warm in the evening too.
Yeah, no, for sure.
So I want to thank you so much for coming to the show, for being such a fantastic guest. And
thank you, Shamil. This is great. I really enjoyed the conversation.
I wish you the best for Archie Labs, and Archie Core that we'll be hearing about in the coming months too.
Yes, we will be making some very big announcements in the next few weeks. So I know we didn't talk about that too much today, but we'll talk about it another time. But some big announcements that'll be coming in the next few weeks.
Would love to. Okay.
Awesome.
That's a pod. Thank you to everyone for sticking with us for the duration of the whole episode, and we'll see you in the next one.